Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Crowded Booth Live. It's been, what should we say, Ralph? It's been a minute since we've been on. Some things got busy. We were taking care of some things, but hey, we're back. And I don't think there is a better timing, Ralph, for the news that has come out in the sports world than for us today. We're going to talk a little bit about that. Obviously, Oklahoma-Texas movement. If you're local to us, regionalized, we obviously have the Atlanta Braves who are trying to we'll get to it. That's going to be our final thoughts. But dare we say, you don't want to give an ultimatum. The season comes down to this week for Atlanta. This is going to be a big trajectory moment, big launch moment for them. We'll see exactly what they can do. Good news on that front. Hopefully by the end of the show, we'll have some better news for you regarding the Atlanta Braves, who are in the middle of game one, finishing that one up hopefully, and game two will start after that. But first, hey, we appreciate you watching. We know we got some viewers right now on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Appreciate everyone tuning in. And today we are going to talk, Ralph, some rapid reactions. Texas and Oklahoma to the SEC. I know we got a lot to talk about tonight. Let's don't get too far into it, but just your ultimate reaction from a college football fan standpoint. What is your reaction when you saw the news come across your phone, Texas and Oklahoma to the SEC?
I had two really big thoughts. And the first one was, this is the decline of the Big 12. And I think that's obvious to everyone. I think the Big 12 has been kind of declining the past few years, and this is really the number one step. Secondly, I think it's more of a wake-up call to a lot of teams that, you look at the SEC and you're a team that is a other Power 5 conference besides the SEC, and you win, let's say, 11 to 12 games a year, but you lose one or two toward the end, you're not making the playoffs because you're a one-loss team. But in the SEC, if you're a one-loss team who lost to your conference champion, you still have a good chance of making the playoffs because you're an SEC team. So Texas and Oklahoma looking and like, well, we lose one game to each other, but we're a conference champion and or we didn't get our conference champion, we're still a one-loss team is really good, and we're in the SEC. We have a chance to make the playoffs still. So that's what they're looking into. But honestly, I don't like it because it's I think everyone said it best. It's a super conference now, and it starts to break all the other conferences up and make everything look smaller, honestly.
It does. I think that's the big thing is you start to see some of the fallout. We're going to talk about that, how it affects. I think my initial reaction was, remember 10 to 12 years ago, we saw this happen with the initial movement of conference realignment, and it was the Pac-12, then the Pac-10 that Texas was interested in. And I think, myself, I was included, there was how much could we really read into this? Because let's take us back 10, 11 years, Ralph. Social media wasn't as prominent. Imagine if Twitter was as prominent when Texas was rumored to go to the Pac-10, Pac-12 at that time. I mean, you have to be able to decipher between the social media people who are just throwing out their rumors to fuel the fire or the actual factual evidence. Now, the two big things that fell over the past 24 hours that kind of laid out into our show perfectly was the Big 12 came out late last night and talked about they were going to have a conversation about how they could better the conference that could benefit both Texas and Oklahoma. And then less than 24 hours later, Texas and Oklahoma have rumored to say that they are not going to renew the media deal, which is the big domino to fall in this. Yeah. And so obviously when you talk about the media deal, I think the initial reaction, Ralph, is you see some of these the casual observer, the casual fan says, oh, well, that's just money. We're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars to get out of these big time media deals. This is not chump change that schools can just fork over. This would be unprecedented to what we've seen to be able to buy yourself out of these media deals. So walking alongside that, I think it was something very big. I didn't know how much I really read into it, And now it seems like the big thing is the SEC is going to meet this Thursday, and then they're going to have a vote. So there's kind of some more steps. Now, the rumor is it wouldn't happen until 2025, Ralph. But when you look at this, you were kind of hinting at it. How to you does this affect the college football landscape?
I mean, you're looking at conferences such as the Big 12 now. If you lose two of your most powerful teams in the conference and your big money makers, honestly, you're losing a ton of money. You're starting to you're going to fill those two gaps, and you're not going to find a team in the country who can fill those two gaps to make enough money to where you want to be a Power 5 conference or as dominant as a Power 5 conference. You look at the Pac-12 right now. You got Oregon and USC are the most dominant schools. If you lose one of those, the Pac-12 just is going to be gone. Not gone, but it's basically irrelevant. And that's what's wrong with the Big 12. You're irrelevant now, and that really takes away the Power 5 concept. Now we have a Power 4 concept because Big 12 really is there's nothing powerful about it. And then you have rumors saying well, now you'll see schools starting to leave for other conferences from the Big 12. The Big 12 will just fade away, and we'll just have another conference step up. Well, that would make more sense to me, and I think you and I have talked about that. A conference that can fill that gap, which could be the American Conference, who has been very, very dominant the past few years, and who has made a lot of different runs, and with Cincinnati last year and UCF a few years ago. You can see other conferences that step up. You can see teams starting to fold into different conferences. I think one I really like to see is I would like to see West Virginia lead the Big 12 and go to the ACC. I think that makes way more sense for them. For where they are location-wise to go instead of playing all the way over in Texas and Oklahoma all the time. That's a lot of traveling. And fans don't want to travel to out west to go watch one game. They would travel, 2 hours, 3 hours on the road and then come back. So you'll start to see a lot of different things happen the next few years or months to years. And it's going to be a while. It was still got a while to go because 2025 is still – we got 4 years to this happen. So there's a lot of things that could change, a lot of things that could be rumored again, and you never know.
You never know, and I think that begs the question, too, of what will other schools do. What I do believe, and we put this out on our social media pages, I do believe this is going to change, Ralph, college football as we know it. I think this is the first step, the first domino to fall when you talk about what college football will look like. Because I beg the question, and let's just talk about this, and before we kind of get into what we may see, to me, what is the point? And this is no disrespect towards this program. We talked about it off air. What's the point of Vanderbilt? What is the point of Vanderbilt? What is the point? Let's just go even into other conferences. Duke in the ACC. I mean, they've been very bad recently. Boston College. I understand these schools offer value in other sports, but football is the moneymaker. Football is what drives the bus for these conferences. You look at,
like you said, in other sports, Duke's moneymaker is basketball, obviously, and Vanderbilt's moneymaker is baseball. So that's one part of the year. Football is it's your bigger moneymaker, like you just said. So you want to be that at least the dominant school in that one sport where you can make, however much money you make that year, and then you can, go off your other sports. Like look at Auburn right now. I'm using Auburn because Will's not here. Auburn's very good in football. They make a lot of money in football. But they roll into basketball season where Bruce Pearl's made an incredible team. They roll into baseball season, which they are every year are making different runs. They're not as incredible as they have been, but they're making better runs. And even softball has made some few runs in the past for Auburn. Georgia's the same way. Georgia has some exciting basketball seasons, some really not exciting seasons. Baseball's getting better for Georgia. Georgia made a great run in the softball tournament this year. So you're looking at other teams or other schools that roll off their off of football into different sports so they can be just as good. Vanderbilt can't really do that. It starts in baseball season and ends in baseball season for them.
Yeah, and they've tried to improve, and I guess this is the thing we're talking about. When you say, Bryce, what does it mean if college football changes as we know? Well, what it means is that Vanderbilt, who let's say that their cap under their new head coach, and you might say, well, Bryce, you're crazy for thinking that. Well, remember, at their best under James Franklin, this is what they were hitting. They were hitting that 7-win to 8-win mark. So let's just put their best possible scenario at 7-5 right now, okay? Yep. If you add in Oklahoma and Texas, now I'm not saying those Oklahoma and Texas teams will, dominate the conference. I'm saying that you knock down Vanderbilt to now a 4 to 5 win team because you're knocking down these teams that had a chance to be bowl eligible, had a chance, and it's like South Carolina this year. We don't, the numbers for them, they have like 4.5, 3.5 win projection this year. You're knocking those teams down even further. And so what you're doing is you're creating a no-win scenario for a program like Vanderbilt that can't do really much of anything. So what I believe is happening, and dare I say, I think you're going to enter a situation where 10 years from now, you're going to have 30 programs in set up just like the NFL, where almost half of those 30 programs make a playoff. And let's say it's a 12-team playoff between those 30 programs and they play each other all year, and it's going to look just like the NFL. Then you're going to have an FBS of what's your non-Power 5, your group of 5 schools, and then you're going to have your FCS. Now, great comment here from Blue Bloods. That's Zach McKinnell, who's been on the show before. He thinks the American Conference is going to be the next Power 5 conference because the Big 12 is done. So I want to bring that up to you because we were talking about this. What will happen to the Big 12? If Texas and Oklahoma leave, Ralph, you have to believe it's going to have to fold. This is a conference that was already at 10. They would go down to 8. And really, no disrespect to programs like Baylor or Iowa State, who you would think Iowa State would rise to the cream of the crop. But Iowa State doesn't have the brand, the tradition to withhold that conference. Now, look, they have a very good team. There are a lot of people's picks to maybe could potentially crash the Big 12 and maybe crash the playoff. They're a trendy pick right now. We talked about that a couple weeks ago. But in your opinion,
they did beat Oklahoma and Texas last year.
They did. But in your opinion, Iowa State's brand can't carry the Big 12 for the next 10 years. So my thought process is, and we won't get into who goes where, but do you see the Big 12 surviving this if Texas and Oklahoma leave?
Absolutely not. I mean, I think Zach just put in there, Kansas and Iowa State have been in talks with the Big Ten, which is a good thing for them. If that's happening, that's a good thing for them because Iowa State and Kansas, or Iowa State will thrive in the Big Ten. They need to be in the Big Ten in the first place. But you lose Texas and Oklahoma State right now, you're talking about – Texas and Oklahoma, you're talking about a major defeat in everything because Oklahoma State, Baylor, and Iowa State are your front runners. I mean, those 3 teams really don't bring a lot to the table. I mean, Baylor has been good the past few years. They made a good run a few years ago, went to the Sugar Bowl and got beat by Georgia. After that, downhill. Oklahoma State's had the same coach for the past 15 to 20 years. Mike Gundy's a fun coach to watch. He's had a mullet. He shaved the mullet. Now we're upset about it. But, you don't have a team that can carry the Big 12 like Texas and Oklahoma could. I mean, Texas and Oklahoma have dominated their conference the past few years where they've been able to, be that rise. And, Texas can be a contender for every year. Oklahoma can be a contender every year. Iowa State, Oklahoma State, Baylor are not contenders every single year. And the Big 12 will just fade away. I mean, everyone's going to roll into different conferences. Everyone's going to go flip to their conference. And, I don't even think Zach said it in there. Kansas will be in talks with Big Ten. I don't think Kansas last in the FBS much longer. I think they dropped the FCS. I don't think they can compete.
Yeah. And I think, too, what's interesting, what you're talking about is we're not talking about we're talking about the brand. And listen, and I got a great comment here. It wasn't in but it's under a tweet that when I shared the show, it said, for years, people have been lying to themselves about pageantry and tradition when really it's about the money. And that's what we have to understand, Ralph. It is about the money. And so when you talk about that, you're not saying Oklahoma State, Baylor, and Iowa State. Let's just say the big 3 without those, they wouldn't be able to do that. We got some comments we're going to get to here in a second. But I just think this is the big thing when you look at it. Oklahoma State, Baylor, and Iowa State. Let's take those. And you could TCU hasn't been good in a decade at this point. And we're talking about good. We're talking about a contender for a New Year's Six bowl. That's what if we're establishing that level.
Yeah, that's your level.
That's your level.
Honestly, unless you're a power, power conference like Alabama or power team like Alabama, Clemson, and Georgia, your highest is national championship. Yeah. But like teams like TCU is in the New Year's Six bowl every year.
So it begs the question. I don't think that they can carry the conference. I think that's why we'll see. We're going to get some comments right here. This is a good one. Gavin Hart, appreciate you tuning in, Gavin. Good to see you, man. The conference champ without OU and UT is a guaranteed 2 or 3 loss team right now. And I like that. I like that because you saw an Iowa State team that lost, and correct me if I'm wrong, was it Louisiana last year to a Sunbelt program. That would have been your Big 12 champion. And I'm not saying Iowa State's not a good program, but what happens when these guys leave? What happens when Breece Hall and the rest of these seniors, upperclassmen leave? Can they reload? Do they have that ability? Do they have the national recruiting brand to be able to sit there and say, we're going to bring more people in? Another one right here, Zach comes back with, I think that their basketball may save them, but football may need to be FCS. Talking about Kansas. Chris Bryan, appreciate you tuning in the show, Chris. He sees Baylor and Oklahoma State will go to the Pac-12, and Kansas and Iowa State will go to the Big Ten. Chris, appreciate you tuning in, man. The only thing that would hold this, and we have to remember this too, is a lot of this is about money. So a lot of it about this is about media rights. Would the Big Ten want two Iowa schools? Because Iowa, we're seeing it from A&M right now in the SEC. They're trying to block Texas coming in. Iowa could possibly do that too. Now, we know Iowa and Iowa State have a great rivalry every single year. But, Ralph, when we talk about what the other conferences could do, listen, Zach pointed out the American Conference. We talked about the Pac-12. We talked about the Big Ten. When you look at this, if you want to talk about the Big 12, what they could do, the realistic thing is they would have to poach from the American or maybe from the Mountain West, and you're talking about maybe like Boise State or someone like that. So I want to pose this. I think you and I we could break it down by conference. I want to pose this. If we go Pac-12, I think Pac-12 would have to make a move to be relevant. I think that's something they would have to do. And you talked about that right there. Right here, TCU could maybe fall back into the American Conference like that as well. I think the Big Ten doesn't have to make a move necessarily because Ohio State's brand, if Michigan somehow finds themselves back up top, Penn State has a good bounce back year. Remember, they were down in the COVID season. They have no – this is the thing. These other conferences, and I want to get to the ACC later because I actually talked about this past week. These other conferences, Ralph, they have enough of depth of brand where they could be okay, but it wouldn't hurt them. Like you said, but I don't think Oregon and USC are leaving, but those are two programs that are on the rise. No one's getting excited about Utah. Let's just be honest. No one's getting too excited about Utah. They got a great program, but they don't have that. They're not in LA or they're not in Eugene, the Nike facility right next to them.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'll give it to you here. Do you feel like Pac-12 and Big Ten, and we'll get to the ACC because I got something separate I want to say. Those two big conferences, do they have to make a move?
I don't think they had to make a big move. I mean, you can accept one or two teams. I don't think the Iowa State move to the Big Ten will make any. Will happen because of what you said about Iowa. I do think the Pac-12 makes a move though. I think they go and poach someone from another conference if the Big 12 does bring in someone else. Because you're not thinking about what schools you could bring in the Big 12 is probably Houston and or maybe even Memphis or Cincinnati, I guess. But if that happens, or if the Cincinnati wants to lead the American Conference, they're more than likely going to go. They'll go to ACC or Big 12 because Big 10 won't happen because of Ohio State and the same right there with them. I don't think they want to be in the same conference as Ohio State. But like you said, did they make a move? I don't think anyone else makes a huge move. If it does happen, it's going to be the Pac-12 making a move and poaching from a conference out of the Mountain West or the American Conference. In ACC, I think the only thing they really do is either officially pick up Notre Dame or bring in Notre Dame and UCF.
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. You talked about the Pac-12. I could see them poaching a potential Oklahoma State, a Texas Tech, a Baylor, something like that. I think the American Conference, going back to Zach's comment earlier, could be something interesting. And then Gavin brings up another good point, Ralph. Geography no longer matters. We saw that when West Virginia joined the Big 12. Now, would it make a lot of sense? I think this too. But I was having a conversation last night, so this brings us to the ACC. And Zach, it gets to your latest comment that you had. The ACC, I don't think there needs to be a knee-jerk reaction because, listen, money-wise across the Power Five, the ACC lacks. They're dead last when it comes to money across the Power Five of media. So your goal is you have to be able to put your footprint in an area, Ralph, that makes the most sense. You're not going to go pick up, and I had this conversation last night, you're not going to pick up USF and La Tech. No disrespect to those two programs. You're not going to do that.
Not going to do anything.
Now, USF is in Tampa. I'm sorry. I don't mean anything bad. Tampa's a great market. But you pointed out the big one. The ACC, in my opinion, does not need to make a move unless you guarantee that Notre Dame comes in. And right now, there's no traction on that because Notre Dame loves their NBC contract, the big money they get to keep from all of it, and points to them. I think UCF's an interesting option. I've seen a couple in the comments about Cincinnati to the Big Ten. I think Cincinnati to the ACC wouldn't be a bad idea.
No,
this is a conversation you start
sense,
to
honestly.
It does. And this is also, Ralph, a part where if you were to add a Cincinnati, you start to put that footprint into the Ohio areas. So it's something very interesting. And then you talk about West Virginia. If you added West Virginia because of the fallout, I like what you said geography-wise. I don't know if there's a ton of, remember, it comes down to money value to adding a West Virginia. and that's not no knock on where they are right now. I think that you would have to get Notre Dame and then add a West Virginia or a UCF because Notre Dame's going to be the big moneymaker for you, and then to even it out. To add a West Virginia and put you – that doesn't do too much unless you get Notre Dame. So Notre Dame's got to be the first domino to fall for me. We're going to come right back and we're going to talk a little bit more about this. It's a great conversation. Appreciate everyone tuning in. We're going to talk about the super conferences, maybe some more potential moves we'll see when we come right back. But here at first is a fun ad. You've seen it before. You love it. Cook's Hot Dogs.
Cook's Place began serving our signature hot dogs in 1985 from a cart on Broadway. We still serve the best hot dogs and scrambled dogs in town at the corner of Moon and Miller Road and at the landings. Our friendly staff won't let you leave hungry. Come in and eat to the beat with our 50s jukebox. Cook's Place. Fast service, great people, awesome food. What are you waiting for?
Back here on the Crowded Booth, we appreciate you tuning in on a Monday night, July 26, 2021. We're talking about Oklahoma, Texas to the SEC. We're talking about how it affects the college football landscape. Bryce Kuhn alongside Ralph Leary. Ralph, before we went to commercial, we were talking about Notre Dame, and I think a timely comment came in from John Chansey watching over on Facebook. John, we appreciate you tuning in. Notre Dame won't join a conference until they feel they can't win a national championship as an independent. They aren't there yet. With the expansion of the playoff, Notre Dame will stay independent as long as they can. If that happens, and I agree, I like what you said there, John. Appreciate you tuning in. But he is right. Until they feel like their hands forced, and if it goes to what I was talking about earlier where there's this 30-team super mega conference, 25, it's just that. But I think what you get in danger is if you see the SEC come synonymous with college football. And I'll say this too, Ralph. We talked about the playoff expansion a little bit. We're going to talk about it more because college football, there is no off season, and we are officially – camp is about to start. The media days are over. It's a great time of the year.
Ooh, baby.
But the SEC right now is positioning themselves with Texas and Oklahoma, if it does happen in 2025, and let's say the playoff expands to 12, they're positioning themselves to try and take at least half of those spots. And I think that's safe to say because if you get to it, and let's just say you have a 9-3 LSU or a 9-3 Texas or a 9-3 Oklahoma, they're going to get in over a 10-2 or 11-1 team from the Pac-12 if everything stands.
Exactly.
So I think that's very interesting to see. The SEC is you can say it's about greed, it's about wanting the most money. They're trying to push their brand out there, and you got to give them credit for doing that. We're going to wrap up the conversation, Ralph, just with kind of we talked about this super conferences. Yes, no. What's your general feeling when I tell you super conference? What do you think?
It's the same thing about super teams to me. I can't stand super teams. I hate super conferences. I hate the whole Big Three thing in the NBA. I hate bringing Kevin Durant, James Harden, and Kyrie on the Nets. That made no sense to me. I don't like it. It brings no fun to me. It brings the SEC will be the most dominant conference. As growing up as an SEC fan, I would like to see competition. I would like to see go play an ACC school and lose a game. It's okay to lose games. Auburn plays they were supposed to play North Carolina last year, and obviously COVID happened and we didn't play. I like seeing games where most conferences face each other and the best schools from each conference face each other in the beginning of the year. That shows what can happen. Like Georgia and Clemson this year, that's a great rivalry right now to me. That's a non-conference team. But if you start to see some of these conferences, dwindle down and people start moving into the SEC to make it a super conference, those games will be irrelevant to each other. You can lose to Clemson, but you'll play Alabama, Texas, and Oklahoma in the same season. You can win all those games and lose to Clemson and be just fine. It's just or lose two of those games and be just fine because you're playing the best in your conference every single year. It's any game outside of the conference is irrelevant, honestly.
This is something that's very interesting. I want to bring it up before we talk about this. This is Zach with the Blue Bloods College Football Podcast. I don't think it'll ever happen, but do you realistically think the SEC Super Conference rumors are true? No way the NCAA lets them get Ohio State, Michigan, Clemson, FSU, in my opinion. I'm going to let another viewer answer that. Chris, we appreciate you being tuned in on the whole show. I can also see college football breaking away from the NCAA and governing themselves. So this, and I want to say this, I was having a conversation with someone today about this, and Ralph, this is kind of what I think. I think the NCAA knew this was going to happen. I think the powers that be know this is going to happen. And what they say, we're going to let this NIL pass, but we're going to expect you college athletes to play a schedule and essentially make it minor league NFL football. And that's what's going to happen. And so now the players can't complain about playing 15 to 16 to 17 games a year, because now what's going to happen is you are going to have 2 super conferences. And going back to your thing, Zach, I don't want it to happen. I'm not a fan of super conferences. I'm a traditionalist. Heck, if it was my idea, we'd have this old Southwest Conference. Arkansas would be over there with all these other schools. I like the geographic. I think what makes college football so much fun, Ralph, is when you see the geographical and regional rivalries. That's what makes it fun. When you have where we are right now, Columbus, Georgia, up Interstate 85, you have Auburn fans and Georgia fans that hate each other. Why? Because part of them were born here in Columbus, Georgia. The parents went to Auburn, other half went to Georgia, and that's what makes it so much fun. That's what people love about college football. Well, what has happened? Money, TV, media deals has come in with this ushering of this new age, and it's changed the way we look at things, and it's also changed the mindset of what people have seen in college football and how it should be played. The big domino fell a decade ago when people up in the mountains of West Virginia thinking they were going to have their rivalry with Pitt, the backyard brawl that was so much fun. Remember those games? It was great. And I love that. Bring back the Georgia Tech Auburn. I love it, Zach. I want to throw it up there. Bring back the Georgia Tech Auburn rivalry too. But I want to say this because I think we saw the domino fall 10 years ago when West Virginia moved to Big 12. What happened? West Virginia, Syracuse didn't get to play each other anymore. The Big East, as we knew it, was kind of gone those traditional rivalries. Texas A&M moves over. Texas A&M and Texas. Thank God we're not saying the Red Raiders of Texas Tech too in that sentence.
Oh, Jesus.
Those rivalries are not there.
Yeah.
So what I say when I say all this is I love college football. To me, and listen, you can ask me, I love baseball. College football is the best sport on God's green earth.
100%.
Hands down.
1,000%.
I get chills, Ralph. I watch LSU's national championship hype video every single week. It's amazing.
I love it.
So I say all this to say, it scares me because I do see what Chris was saying earlier about college football breaking off and making, let's just say, 30 programs. And there's no geographical work with it. It's just 30 programs on 2 sides. And you play it like the NFL.
Main programs, the highest money makers.
Exactly. And let's just say this. It's your Ohio State, Michigan, Notre Dame, Clemson, Georgia, Alabama, Florida, Auburn,
Oregon,
Tennessee,
Texas,
Oregon,
Oklahoma.
USC, Texas. It's those. It's the big brand programs. It doesn't matter. And let's just be honest. It doesn't matter that Tennessee's been bad. What do they have? They got this right here. And that's what drives it. That's exactly what drives it.
It's all in the McDonald's bags.
It's all in the McDonald's. Ralph, I know you had something you wanted to add to that about how you felt about super conferences.
Well, even like super conferences in general, I think recruiting is a huge thing at this point. Now, you especially looking with Texas and Oklahoma moving to the SEC. You're talking about kids in Texas who probably wanted to play that Texas-Oklahoma rivalry, or even wanted to play at Oklahoma State and want to have that Oklahoma State-Oklahoma rivalry because you want to go to those teams that you might grow up around. Like, say if you're an Auburn fan. You're a kid in Auburn. You go to Auburn High School. You go to Auburn University. You play football for Auburn. You're excited to play Alabama every year, no matter who else you play. That Iron Bowl game is what you look forward to. Say you're in Texas. You live in Austin, Texas. You grow up in Austin. You go to whatever high school is, whatever you went to the high school in Texas. You're going to go to UT, play football. You hate Oklahoma with all your passion in your life. You're excited to play Oklahoma every year, and or Texas Tech, and or if you're an Oklahoma fan, Oklahoma State. You leave the conference that those rivals are in, just forget about those games because there's no point in having the game anymore. Because you know what? You're playing Alabama, Georgia, Auburn, Florida, Tennessee, Texas A&M now. Those games mean more. You can't overlook those games anymore.
It just means more.
Exactly. But the thing is, a kid who wants to play in the SEC, they want. If they're in Texas, obviously Alabama's a big recruiter everywhere in the country. Auburn's done pretty well in Texas. Georgia's done pretty well in Texas. Ole Miss has done very well lately in Texas. A&M has dominated, obviously, in the SEC for recruiting-wise. You add Texas in there now, that really cuts that state in half for recruiting for Texas A&M. And that really sucks for them. And that's one of the main reasons why they're trying to block Texas because recruiting is hard to do already in the SEC with Alabama and Georgia already sitting there. You add Texas and Oklahoma, 2 other top power conference or teams, it just really makes it 10 times more harder. It's something that I think it should not happen because on a recruiting standpoint, you were talking about Iowa State a minute ago. If Iowa State was to carry the Big 12, you're looking at a team that only gets their best recruit right now is a 3-star athlete.
Yeah.
Oklahoma, Texas bring in 5 stars every year. Alabama brings in 5 stars every day. Georgia brings in 5 stars every day. You cannot tell me that there'll be one 5-star in the country that does not go to an SEC school or Ohio State. And that's it.
That's a whole nother conversation, how this
I
would
know.
affect recruiting. And that's a good point that you bring up. It's something that it's not like, and I know Will wanted to say this, we understand Oklahoma. Oklahoma's been a team that, to me, they're on the same tier as Georgia. They're a team that has been in the playoff. They've made it very far. The only difference is Georgia made it to a national championship game by beating Oklahoma. That game could have gone either way, if we remember correctly, obviously. One of the best playoff games we've seen since the college football playoff came out between Georgia and Oklahoma. I mean, that was a fantastic Rose Bowl.
Yeah. I'm thinking about the Georgia-Alabama game.
Yeah, but I'm saying, to me, they're on the same tier. They're a team that's around the playoff. They're a perennial top 7 program. You bring them in, okay, sounds good. You bring in Texas. What has Texas done recently record-wise? Nothing. They haven't been good since Matt Brown left. But they're back because they beat Georgia a couple years in the Sugar Bowl, and then they beat Ole Miss.
Oklahoma once.
So Ole Miss beat them, actually. That's correct. Bo Wallace beat Texas. But I say all that to say, Ralph, as we wrap up here, it's going to be interesting how it falls out. We're going to have a show on Wednesday where we're going to talk about it even further. We may have some special guests, too, that come on and join us. It's going to be a ton of fun. But we'll talk about it real quick. Braves season comes down this week. Ralph, Braves won game 1. They got game 2 quickly in 30 seconds or less. Tell me, what does this week with 5 days to the trade deadline mean for the Atlanta Braves?
You can only lose 2 games this week. That is the main thing. You're talking about a Mets team that is struggling. Their best 2 players out for a while. You need to make some ground up right now. You need to take them. You need to sweep the Mets. If you can sweep New York right now on the road, that is a huge turnaround for this team right now. Philadelphia has just been fluctuating on and off all year. One day they're good, one day they're horrible. You watched Atlanta on Saturday night. Was it Saturday night they just beat the absolute brakes off them?
Yes.
And then Sunday come around, they place Aaron Nola. If Aaron Nola's on his game, he's probably what we said the top 5 pitcher in baseball. I completely
in the National League, at least.
Honestly, in baseball, I agree.
Yeah, he's that talented.
But you see Tuki Toussaint go inning for inning with him, who's a Cy Young candidate every year. Tuki Toussaint comes in, second start of the season, 7 innings, 10 strikeouts, best start of his entire career. Mm-hmm. So the Braves have a great few weeks ahead of them if they can win these games. This week right here might be the biggest week of the season. We've said it 1,000 times, but this is it.
It is. It definitely is. It's going to be interesting to see the trade deadline coming up soon. Adam Frazier goes to the San Diego Padres. Dominoes are starting to fall with the trade deadline. It's going to be fun to watch. Ralph, one quick comment before we go away. We did have talking about Gavin Hart. Wanted to get him in here, watch it over on YouTube. Another point there is basically only one interdivision game with the way the schedule is formatted. If OU and UT join the SEC, I'm sure we'll see that change. We're going to talk about that on Wednesday, how the pod play would look like. Well, listen, we appreciate you tuning in. It's been a fun time. Ralph, as always, appreciate you coming on the show as you always do. It's a great time. Hey, we're going to be putting out some college previews. It's going to be a ton of fun stuff. We will talk to you on Wednesday. That's when we'll see you 7 p.m. on Facebook Live, YouTube, and Twitter. We enjoy seeing you there. Make sure to follow us on social media. And hey, also check us out at thecrowdedbooth.com as well as we hook up for a fantastic football season that is surely on its way. Everyone, so long. We'll see you later. And for everyone here, we say have a safe rest of your Monday evening, and we'll see you.